Maya Chen stared at her laptop screen, the glow illuminating her tired face in the dark apartment. Another rejected proposal. Another step closer to giving up on her dream of becoming a renowned architect. She was one unpaid bill away from moving back to her parents' place, a thought that made her stomach churn. The email notification ping startled her. Probably another rejection, she thought. But the subject line made her pause. Unique renovation opportunity, urgent and confidential. Maya's cursor hovered over the delete button. Spam, most likely. But desperation won out, and she clicked. The message was brief, almost cryptic. Miss Chen, your unique vision has caught our attention. We have a project that requires discretion and creativity. Compensation will be substantial. If interested, come to 1876 Ravens Hollow Road tomorrow at sunset. Come alone, et. Maya laughed. This had to be a joke, right? But as she cross-referenced the address, her laughter died. The property was real, a massive, long-abandoned estate on the outskirts of town. Sleep eluded her that night. By morning, curiosity and the promise of a big payday overpowered her reservations. What did she have to lose? As Maya's beat-up Honda crawled up the overgrown driveway at dusk, a sense of unease settled over her. The mansion loomed ahead, a dark silhouette against the fading sky. No lights, no signs of life. She was about to turn back when a figure emerged from the shadows. An old man, impeccably dressed, with eyes that seemed to glow in the twilight. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice surprisingly strong. "I'm glad you came. I am Dr. Thorne. Please, follow me." The interior of the mansion was a time capsule, layers of history visible in every room. Dr. Thorne led her through a maze of corridors, speaking rapidly about his vision for restoration. "You have free rein," he said, "except for one room." They stopped before a heavy oak door, reinforced with modern locks. "This room remains sealed. No exceptions." Maya nodded, though her mind raced with questions. Why this room? What was hidden inside? Dr. Thorne's next words snapped her back to attention. "Your fee," he said, naming a figure that made Maya's eyes widen. "Half now, half upon completion. Do we have a deal?" It was too good to be true. It had to be. But as Maya shook Dr. Thorne's cold hand, she couldn't help feeling she'd just made a deal with the devil himself. That night, in a dusty guest room, Maya's dreams were haunted by whispers from behind locked doors and shadows that moved on their own. She woke with a start, heart pounding, to find a manila envelope slid under her door. Inside was a check for an obscene amount of money and a single skeleton key that fit none of the doors she'd seen. Maya stared at the key, a chill running down her spine. What had she gotten herself into? And more importantly, how far was she willing to go to find out? The next morning, Maya woke to the sound of rain pelting the weathered windows. For a moment, she forgot where she was, the unfamiliar shadows of the guest room looming over her. Then reality crashed back the mansion. Dr. Thorne, the mysterious locked room, and the check. God, the check. She dressed quickly, eager to start work and push away the lingering unease from her dreams. The house creaked and groaned around her as she made her way to the kitchen, armed with her laptop and a determination to prove herself worthy of Dr. Thorne's trust and payment. Hours passed as Maya lost herself in plans and sketches. The mansion's potential was intoxicating, each room a canvas for her vision. But as the day wore on, she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. More than once, she whirled around, certain she'd caught movement in her peripheral vision, only to find empty air. It was mid-afternoon when she heard a soft, rhythmic tapping coming from somewhere above. Maya frowned. Dr. Thorne had mentioned he'd be away for a few days. Was someone else in the house? Heart pounding, she climbed the stairs, following the sound. It grew louder as she approached the third floor, then suddenly stopped. Maya found herself facing the forbidden door, its heavy oak seeming to mock her curiosity. The skeleton key burned in her pocket, but she resisted the urge to try it. Instead, she pressed her ear to the wood, holding her breath. Silence. Then, so faint she almost missed it, a whisper, "Help me." Maya jerked back, stumbling against the opposite wall. This couldn't be happening. She was hearing things, her imagination running wild in this old house. She hurried back downstairs, trying to laugh off her paranoia. But as she resumed work, her eyes kept drifting to the ceiling, to where she knew that room waited. And try as she might, she couldn't forget that whispered plea. The next few days fell into a pattern. Maya would work feverishly on her designs, pushing the limits of her creativity. But the house seemed determined to distract her. Books would fall from shelves with no one near them. Doors she'd sworn she'd closed would be wide open when she returned. And always, she felt those unseen eyes on her. On the fourth night, unable to sleep, Maya decided to explore. Armed with her phone's flashlight, she crept through the silent halls. Each room held its own history, its own secrets. In one, she found a child's toy, half hidden under a rotting floorboard. In another, a collection of photographs, the faces scratched out with unsettling precision. As she turned to leave the attic, a glint caught her eye. There, wedged between the floorboards, was an old locket. Maya pried it loose, her fingers trembling as she opened it. Inside was a faded photograph of a young woman, her eyes sad but determined. Scrawled on the back in faded ink, Elizabeth, 1952. Never forget. The locket weighed heavily in Maya's pocket as she descended the attic stairs. Each step creaked, as if the house itself protested her intrusion into its secrets. She couldn't shake the feeling that by taking the locket, she had crossed an invisible line. Back in her room, Maya examined her find under the harsh light of her desk lamp. The woman in the photo, Elizabeth, stared back at her, eyes filled with a sadness that transcended time. Who was she? And why did Dr. Thorne want that room sealed so badly? Sleep eluded her that night, her dreams a chaotic swirl of whispered pleas and shadowy figures. She woke with a start, sunlight streaming through the dusty curtains. For a moment, she considered packing her bags and leaving this mystery behind. But the promise of the paycheck and her own burning curiosity kept her rooted. As Maya threw herself into her work over the next few days, strange occurrences multiplied. She'd return to rooms she'd just left to find furniture rearranged. The temperature would plummet in certain areas of the house, her breath visible even on warm days. And always, there was that feeling of being watched. It was on the seventh day that things took a truly sinister turn. Maya was in the library, cataloging the ancient tomes that lined the walls, when she noticed a book out of place. As she reached for it, the entire shelf swung outward, revealing a hidden passage. Heart pounding, Maya peered into the darkness. The beam of her flashlight revealed a narrow staircase, descending into the bowels of the house. Against her better judgment, she began to climb down. The air grew thick and stale as she descended. At the bottom, she found herself in a small, circular room. The walls were lined with photographs, dozens of them. Young women, all bearing a striking resemblance to Elizabeth from the locket. And beside each photo, a date and a red X. Maya's blood ran cold as she realized what she was looking at. This wasn't just a renovation job. This was the lair of a predator, a monster who had been operating for decades, and she was in the middle of it. As if on cue, she heard the distant sound of a door opening upstairs. Dr. Thorne's voice echoed through the house, calling her name. Maya's heart raced. She had to get out, had to escape. But as she turned to flee, her elbow knocked against a shelf. A small box tumbled to the floor, spilling its contents a collection of skeleton keys, identical to the one in her pocket. In that moment, Maya knew. The locked room upstairs, the whispered pleas, the long history of disappearances, it all connected. She wasn't here to renovate. She was the next victim. With trembling hands, Maya gathered the keys and the damning photographs. She had to get out, had to expose this horror. But as she reached the top of the hidden staircase, she came face to face with Dr. Thorne. His eyes, once merely unsettling, now blazed with a predatory gleam. "Miss Chen," he said, his voice chillingly calm. "I see you've been exploring. How? Unfortunate." Maya backed away, her mind racing for an escape plan. The game had changed. Now, it wasn't just about uncovering the truth, it was about survival. Maya's heart raced as she faced Dr. Thorne, her back pressed against the bookshelf. Her mind whirled, searching for a way out. The weight of the locket and keys in her pocket seemed to ground her, reminding her of the lives at stake. "Dr. Thorne," she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. "What have you done?" His lips curled into a cruel smile. "What I've always done, my dear. Preserving beauty, keeping it safe from the ravages of time. You understand that, don't you? As an architect." He took a step forward, and Maya's hand closed around a heavy book on the shelf behind her. As Dr. Thorne lunged, she swung with all her might. The tome connected with a sickening thud, and he staggered back, momentarily stunned. Maya seized her chance. She bolted past him, racing through the winding corridors of the mansion. Behind her, she could hear Dr. Thorne's enraged shouts and pounding footsteps. She reached the main hall, the front door in sight, when a thought struck her. The locked room. Someone was still trapped up there. In a split-second decision that could cost her everything, Maya turned and sprinted up the stairs. She fumbled with the skeleton keys, her hands shaking as she tried one after another in the lock of the forbidden door. Dr. Thorne's voice boomed from the bottom of the stairs. "You can't save her, Maya. No one can." Finally, a key turned. The door swung open, revealing a pale, emaciated young woman huddled in the corner. Elizabeth's granddaughter, Maya realized, seeing the family resemblance. "Come on," Maya urged, helping the woman to her feet. "We're getting out of here." They stumbled down the stairs together, Dr. Thorne's enraged figure looming at the bottom. But Maya was ready. She'd grabbed a fire poker from a nearby hearth, and now she wielded it like a sword. "It's over, Dr. Thorne," she declared, her voice stronger than she felt. "The police are on their way." A bluff, but one she prayed he'd believe. For a moment, uncertainty flickered in his eyes. It was all the opening Maya needed. She swung the poker, catching him off guard. As he fell, Maya and the young woman rushed past, out into the cool night air. They didn't stop running until they reached Maya's car, hidden down the drive. As they sped away, Maya could see police lights in her rearview mirror, approaching the mansion. She'd managed to place a frantic 911 call during their escape. In the days that followed, the true extent of Dr. Thorne's crimes came to light. The mansion yielded its grim secrets, and families long bereaved finally found closure. Maya's testimony, along with the evidence she'd gathered, ensured that justice would be served. As for Maya, the experience changed her. She found a new purpose, using her architectural skills to help transform the mansion into a sanctuary for survivors of abuse. The locked rooms and hidden passages were demolished, replaced with open, light-filled spaces of healing. And sometimes, late at night, Maya would take out Elizabeth's locket and remember. Not all renovations were about building, she realized. Sometimes, the most important reconstructions were those of the human spirit. As she stood on the mansion's porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of hope, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. The nightmare was over, but her journey was just beginning.